This was a card that could have had John Jones on it, could have had Conor McGregor on it. So I think for some people, when they looked at the card, they were like, this is going to kind of be a letdown. But as happens often, cards that people will sweat a bit saying, hey, I'm just not into it, turn out to be just juggernauts. What was your favorite fight? What did you think was the big moment of UFC 290?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right about what this could have been. And I think that was a little bit of it, the fact that we could have had Jones, we could have had McGregor. And it's International Fight Week, what people have come accustomed to. But this obviously was anchored by one of the greatest fighters to ever live, Alexander Volkanovski, the king of the featherweight division, but sitting right near the top of the pound-for-pound rankings. But even with Volkanovski getting his showcase, even with a fantastic fight of the year candidate between Brandon Moreno and Alexandre Pantoja. For me, I've been watching this sport for 30 years. I tuned in on the illegal satellite dish in 1993 because I heard you could punch people in the groin and you get there were no rules, there were elbows. I mean, I was a real, freak show curiosity for me 30 years ago. And to watch it firsthand, and then obviously to cover it for the last 16 years, I'd be remiss if I wouldn't say that Robbie Lawler having his final fight, former UFC welterweight champion Robbie Lawler, pioneer Robbie Lawler, been in the game over 20 years, been fighting in the UFC for over 20 years, having his final fight, getting inducted to the Hall of Fame for his fight with Rory McDonald on Thursday night, and then 48 hours later turns around in the ABC prelim highlight, the main event of the ABC, the free portion of the card, the final fight of that free portion goes out there against Nico Price.
That was it. It's the end of the spot. We're never going to find out if Robbie Lawler won. No, he won. Robbie Lawler won. Ryan McKinnell's with us.
Know this as well as I do. Hey, you don't get to say goodbye like Robbie Lawler did. And I don't know if there's a better ambassador for the sport or a better guy that could have went out like this. It will be the lasting image for me. But I'm an old graybeard.
Ryan McKinnell, not that old. He works for SiriusXM, is always part of the company. He's up with us here on Cofield and Company on ESPN Las Vegas.
All right, Ryan, I've got to ask you about it. Sincerely, you're one of the biggest allies out there. So what were your thoughts when Dricus Du Plessis beats Robert Whittaker, the number 2 middleweight in the world, and they bring in Izzy? They bring in the champ, the face-off middleweight championship of the world. This is the next match. And Izzy just goes on the inward tirade against Dricus Du Plessis, the South African.
Yeah, well, Dana White didn't seem to have a problem with it.
Yeah, he said there's no racial undertones. Is what he said.
Here's the thing, Ryan. Ryan, real quick.
The backstory.
Go ahead, Ryan.
There's a little bit of a back and forth between Du Plessis and Adesanya over social media over the last year or so, and it really centered around Du Plessis saying that he was more African than Adesanya was. Du Plessis hailing from South Africa, Adesanya with Nigerian heritage but comes from New Zealand, and I mean, Adesanya, this is what happens, man, when you pull someone out of the crowd and you ask them to have something to say. Adesanya was watching the Du Plessis fight, an amazing fight. Dricus Du Plessis goes out there and dispatches a Robert Whittaker, former champion, and he does it in stellar fashion, something that really nobody does over Robert Whittaker. Beat him better than Adesanya did. You know what I'm saying? So he went in there all hopped up. He went in there with a ton of adrenaline, and I'm sure some of that prior back and forth played into what Adesanya was trying to accomplish, but it didn't come off as fireworks. It didn't come off as promotional. It didn't come off as anything that would build toward any interest to the fight. It just came off as an emotion. It came off as emotional and honestly cringeworthy, Damon. It just didn't have. It didn't hit the mark that I think Adesanya was looking for. I didn't see a lot of people that really liked it. It was an emotional fighter squaring off with someone he doesn't really like, and I think it's gonna set the table for when they eventually meet here later this year. And I would expect, I don't think it's going to be that cringy going forward, but clearly your emotions are high between those two. But to answer your question, Damon, I didn't love it, obviously.
I loved it.
I'm with Steve.
Damon, are you insane? And then Dana White, I think, I don't know, do they not teach about South Africa and apartheid at Bishop Gorman? Are you serious? We've got a Nigerian against a white South African, and the white is saying he's more African.
My African brother is how he started. My African
yeah, that's
brother.
what it was. That's
And he said, "You're no brother of mine, son." Oh, it was like a rap battle.
I mean,
Oh, that was the best part.
Yes.
When he said,
Well, what a storyline.
When he just kept repeating the N-word
Okay.
over
That
and over
part,
and
yeah.
over again. It was like, oh man, I get what he was trying to accomplish. See, that's where I think it got lost in translation.
Right.
People didn't know the backstory well enough to exactly what was happening in the moment there. I did, but it still felt like it missed the mark, except for that line about "you're no brother of mine." That was gangster. That was probably what he was sitting there, thinking and steaming about. Like, that was his one good punchline, and he absolutely hammered it home.
Did you like the 36andMe when he said we can do the DNA test to prove who's more African? We're just doing now a breakdown of the war of words.
Yeah, well, it was great, but like 23andMe was probably really conflicted about the publicity they were getting there. Probably wanted to send a note that they was a little bit off the mark on that. But no, clearly, I mean, it's obvious, right, that Adesanya does not like Dricus Du Plessis. And again, that emotion, I don't see that tapering off by the time they eventually meet down in Sydney. You know what I mean? Like, this is clearly one of the UFC's bigger rivalries, and we've only got a taste of it, a little bit on social media and now a little bit inside the cage. And there's all the historical ramifications, and people are clearly, obviously, taking sides. I saw a bunch of people saying, like, on social media, how can you cheer for Adesanya? Like, this guy's insufferable. It's like, whoa. I didn't understand that. Yes, that promo was cringy, but when you watch Israel Adesanya, the style bender, if you have a pair of eyes and a pair of ears and some, actual blood running through your body, I don't see how you can't be interested, respect, and even like Israel Adesanya.
So Willie was all over slap fighting. He covered that. I know you were big on the UFC and 290. Willie, did you have an issue with Dana White using power slap backdrops all week long to promote, power slap, and then even made the Jones Miocic announcement? Because a lot of the UFC guys are pissed off. A lot of the UFC media guys are pissed off that Dana should have been pushing 290. He's taking money out of the pockets of actual MMA fighters versus the slappers.
The fact that Damon sent over a story and said, is this the all-time card? And the fact that you guys are talking about Robbie Lawler's a great farewell, and Ryan's talking about how fantastic and it couldn't have gone out. I think that UFC has the publicity, all the publicity it needs. I don't think that it lost. It lost the media luster, and oh my God, they lost viewers, and they didn't get buyers because he had a power slap background. Yep. If you think that took away from UFC, you are a straight clown. Wow. Because it doesn't.
Company thought that.
Well, it doesn't make sense.
Well, I absolutely thought it did.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, no, I mean, we spent 30 years legitimizing mixed martial arts. In the late 90s, John McCain ran a smear campaign against the sport, called it human cockfighting, had to take it off pay-per-view, spent years, decades rebuilding its legitimacy to get it back on television, to get it back on pay-per-view, to get it sanctioned in a state like New York. And now, over the last couple of years, this sport of mixed martial arts, whether you or specifically the brand of the UFC, is inexplicably linked to power slap. They had a power slap fight on before the weigh-ins on Friday. You look at Dana White's Instagram, half of his posts are about power slap. He's announcing John Jones and Stipe Miocic to the backdrop of power slap. They are becoming one and the same. Did it affect this weekend? No, we're talking about the long game. Go look at the comments on Dana White's Instagram. Scroll through the first 30, 40, 50 comments on a power slap post and see if you can find one positive reply. And it's not bots. It's a bunch of MMA fans being like, keep this out of my sport. Stop force feeding it down our throats. You look ridiculous, and you're making the sport look ridiculous because it is so similar. When you look at the original power slap that was on TBS, they used UFC referees. They used UFC former champions like Forrest Griffin as a body catcher, as someone who catches the unconscious bodies of these quote-unquote athletes, these bums, because that's what it is glorified bum fights, falling in their laps. And there's poor Forrest Griffin having to catch the bodies, and you could tell it was written all over his face. He didn't want to do it. Referee Jason Herzog, he doesn't want to referee it. They threw weigh-ins in the style of the UFC. The show of Power Slap was filmed in the exact style of The Ultimate Fighter, in the same building, and sold story-wise, presentation-wise, like The Ultimate Fighter. It's an absolute joke. It's a carny circus sideshow, and the only reason we're having to hear about it is because now is Dana White has dug his feet in. And you know what? I almost applaud it because I love the hard-headedness. I love the determination that the whole world is going to be against this man and tell him it's trash and tell him it's not going to work. And he's digging in. He's saying, well, you're wrong. I know what's good. And watch this. I'm going to make it work. It's never going to work. He's dead wrong, but I admire the stubbornness.
I like it. Ryan McKinnell looking at our clock because he knows our schedule. And he's like, I'm going to use up all of my debate time to shut out Willie Ramirez, who will now have to answer in the 4 o'clock hour. Ryan, you're awesome. Appreciate it. Thanks for carving out some time for us. And you guys did a great job on SiriusXM. When are you up next? And tell people where they can find the channel.
SiriusXM Fight Nation channel 156. I will be on Unlocking the Cage this Thursday and Friday, filling in for Jimmy Smith. It'll be 6 hours of MMA content. Our time, it'll be 11 to 2 on Thursday and Friday, and I'll be with my pal Andreas Hale. So we'll be talking power slap, I'm sure.
You better.
Knows what other nonsense.
You better.
This was a great weekend for the UFC. Power slap or not, it was awesome to see what the sport has become after all these years.
Thanks, Ryan. What a horse's ass.